Thank you, Garrett. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming to the early meeting. Yes, more to come. Please come in. I'm very happy that we conduct this side event on Central Asia. We've talked to some delegations, and it was already noticed that not so much happening on Central Asia. So we are happy to present today, I think, a very important panel on Kazakhstan, on the recent lawmaking and this constitutional reform process in Kazakhstan. The event is organized by some of the civil society solidarity platform members, the NGO Dignity from Kazakhstan, the Norwegian Helsinki Committee, which is not here today, International Partnership for Human Rights, which I'm representing, and the NGO Civil Liberties, with Sasha on the panel, also as an expert. As a very special guest, we have Anna Dubonen, the OSCE Special Representative, which you all know, and we are happy then to give them welcome remarks. Just very briefly, we'll have 1 hour, so for all experts we have from Kazakhstan, I represented them shortly. We have 5 minutes for an input statement, so that we have enough time also for discussion. We will have 2 participants online. I briefly introduce now the panel to you. It's Alisher Kozhagulov from Astana, from Nomad's Rights Initiative. There's Sasha Romantsova from the Civil Liberty, which you all know, very famous representative, but we have to put in also as a Parisian organization. And Dubonen, I have to present you at the OSCE Anara, Ibrayeva, Dignity. Online, we have also Zhovtis from the Kazakhstan Bureau of Human Rights and Rule of Law from Almaty. And we have also Aida, Aidarkulova online connected to us from CapsUnlock, also from Almaty and Independent. So thank you all for coming. I think we will have exciting discussion as the referendum, as you all know, was already finished on Sunday and had results from yesterday. But the discussion will reflect a bit broader also on the trends affecting the public participation in the legislative process in Kazakhstan, and we will explore challenges related to this process, to inclusiveness, the human rights aspect, the implications, and the impact also on civic space and independent oversight. So please, Arno, I give you the floor for some welcoming remarks. Thanks for joining us. Very spontaneous.
Thank you very much. I'm very honored to have this opportunity to provide welcoming words for this very important side event. Human rights defenders are facing increasing challenges in carrying out their work and holding power holders and governments accountable. Their work is not a threat to democracy. It is essential to democracy. The message is loud and clear. Across the OSCE region, human rights defenders face difficulties obtaining visas and crossing borders. They are attacked, increasingly criminalized, and subjected to defamation campaigns in the media. Many who fear for their lives have had to flee their home countries and continue their work in exile. This is the reality we are living in, but we can change. Emergency laws are becoming permanent and used as tools of oppression. Smear campaigns, harassment, and obstruction of human rights defenders' work are increasing. The security of human rights defenders continues to deteriorate across much of the OSCE region. Local contexts matter. While some violations are country-specific, we can see clear global trends affecting LGBTIQ+ activists, environmental defenders, anti-corruption activists, and feminist movements, to mention a few. In the next hour, we will hear a case study from Kazakhstan. OSCE participating states and other international actors must act and continue calling for respect for international commitments. They must ensure that those risking their lives for all of us, human rights defenders, can operate free from violations. I look forward to discussions and practical recommendations for strengthening meaningful civil society participating in democratic lawmaking. The recommendations in the roadmap for the protection of human rights defenders that we discussed today are both timely and valuable. The measures suggested for the OSCE, including recommendations for the OSCE representative of civil society, position I'm holding at the moment, are highly relevant. OSCE institutions, decision makers, and civil society all need data to act and develop informed policies, advocacy, and implementation. I salute the CSOs and human rights defenders who have worked tirelessly to produce this important roadmap on Kazakhstan based on a broader index covering countries across the globe. This kind of data is urgently needed, and it must be used to ensure that human rights defenders can work and live free from reprisals. Ideally, the data will also inform the upcoming human rights defenders guidelines by ODIHR currently under development. The OSCE can support participating states in implementing their human dimension commitments, and states should welcome this support. Ensuring a protected and enabling environment for human rights defenders is not optional. It is essential to upholding the Helsinki Principles, OSCE commitments, human rights, the rule of law, and resilient societies across our region. Thank you very much. I look forward to the conversations.
Thank you very much, Arno, for these important words. Yes, I mean, the whole process you mentioned, the Human Rights Defender Protection Index, we hear more about it from Anara at the end, and also relation to civic space and lawmaking. This process, Evgeny, you are our next speaker. We read a lot on the news in Kazakhstan, but we would like some insight from you. Evgeny Zhovtis, co-founder of Kazakhstan Bureau on Human Rights. I mean, in a nutshell, it says that it was a very rushed process, very non-inclusive, and also in an environment, you mentioned, Arno, of intimidation and fear, really not hearing any critics, any dissent, criminalizing even the slightest form of dissent to this constitution, and basically in a few weeks rushing through this process. So please share your view on this whole process. If possible, Evgeny, in 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you hear me well? It's okay? You hear me well?
I hear you very loud, so you can even, talk big.
Okay, I will try to speak not so loud. Good morning, everyone. I will try to address the citizen participation in the process of lawmaking, and we'll start with some notion that effectiveness of citizens' participation in the legislative process depends on adherence to a number of principles and procedures, the observance of which determines whether citizens' participation in this process is genuine or merely superficial. This includes providing the public with comprehensive information on legislative proposals of public interest, the timely publication of draft laws, a sufficient period of time and free environment for discussion, free from threats and intimidation, broad inclusion of independent experts in the discussion, public debates, and well-reasoned and substantiated expression of agreement or disagreement by government representatives regarding proposals and critical comments, and so on. Failure to adhere to these principles and procedures turns civic participation into a mere imitation of it, and consequently renders the legislative process undemocratic. As an example, I will take this constitutional reform which is underway. Early September last year, Kazakh President Mr. Tokayev proposed reforming the parliament by transitioning from a bicameral to unicameral system, as well as from a mixed to fully proportional electoral system. It was proposed to hold a broad public discussion of this proposal throughout 2026 and to hold a referendum on constitutional amendments in 2027. Citizens began submitting their proposals through the existing government electronic system for collection of suggestions on draft laws and governmental reforms. No draft law had been introduced in that time. On January 20, 2026, almost 5 months later, the president proposed establishing the office of vice president, creating a new advisory body, the People's Council, and incorporating it into constitution. He also announced that the current constitution was to be revised to such an extent that it will be essentially become a new constitution. At the same time, the president announced the creation of a constitutional commission. No draft law has been published yet. The following day, January 21, 2026, a presidential decree was issued listing the 130-member commission, which includes staff of the presidential administration, heads of the various governmental agencies, the chair and some members of the Constitutional Court, the chair of the Supreme Court, some members of the parliament, some representatives of local executive and legislative authorities from various regions, individual representatives of academia and educational institutions, as well as representatives of the business community and certain public organizations. According to analysis of the Commission's composition conducted by an independent expert, 53 of the 130 Commission members hold law degree. Of these, only 12 hold an advanced degree in law, and only 4 specialized in constitutional law or theory of law. No transparency or clear criteria for the formation of this commission were presented to public. The commission began holding live-streamed meetings, during which its members also began proposing amendments to the current constitution that were unrelated to the proposals put forward and announced by the president. On January 31, following the commission's 10 days deliberations, the full text of the amendments to the current constitution was published, and it was designated as the new constitution, and citizens were invited to discuss it and submit their own proposals. The discussion and submission of proposals on the substance of the matter were effectively halted 10 days later, on February 11th, because the final text of the new constitution was published on that date. Pursuant to a presidential decree issued on the same day, it will be put on the referendum scheduled for March 15, which take place 2 days ago. There was no substantial discussions, public debates on national TV channels, or other efforts to widely inform the public about different points of view. Critics of the text of the new constitution and the referendum were subjected to pressure, including prosecution for spreading false information. Public figure Alisher, who called for a smart boycott of the referendum, was arrested on charges of allegedly preventing citizens from participating in the referendum. The court ruling imposing pretrial detention on him stated that he may continue to post on social media calling for boycott of the referendum, which could lead to negative public opinion regarding the referendum. At the same time, the authorities launched a major campaign of agitation and propaganda in favor of the new constitution and the referendum across all national media channels, including by semi-officially encouraging employees of government agencies, university professors and students, representatives of Gongos, to post on social media in support of new constitution and the referendum. Well-known artists, athletes, and others were also enlisted in these campaigning and propaganda efforts. I will finish with that. Under these circumstances, it is difficult to speak of democratic lawmaking or the effective participation of civil society in it at all. This is rather a classic example of imitational democracy. And unfortunately, as both past experience and the experience of this constitutional reform show, it is clear that these political tactics will continue to be actively used by the authorities in the future, making the legislative process authoritarian rather than democratic. Thank you for your attention. I'll be ready to answer questions.
Evgeny. I propose that we collect the questions at the end after your input. So thank you. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions in detail. We have another human rights expert online, Mrs. Aida Aidarkulova from CapsUnlock, the independent think tank from Almaty, who will also share the challenges in this new constitution, which she says replaces rule of law with the principle of law and order. So let us see if she can connect now. Aida?
Hello, can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you very much.
Oh, super. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. The constitutional referendum held last Sunday in Kazakhstan represents an important moment, not only politically, but constitutionally. From a rule of law perspective, the key question is not only what the constitution says, but how it structures the relationship between the state and society in the legislative process. In this context, Here are a few of my reflections on how the new constitutional framework may influence lawmaking and civic participation in Kazakhstan. First, it is important to note that Kazakhstan reflects rule of law principles, but does not explicitly constitutionalize the concept. The new constitution, like its predecessor, does not explicitly enshrine the principle of the rule of law. However, what is particularly notable is that instead of this principle, it emphasizes the concept of the supremacy of law and order. This is not just a terminological difference, it reflects a conceptual shift. The rule of law, as understood within the OSCE framework, includes limitation of state power, protection of fundamental rights, equality before the law, and independent judicial oversight. By contrast, the concept of law and order traditionally emphasizes stability, compliance, and enforcement. In this sense, the Constitution appears to substitute a principle that constrains power with one that prioritizes order. At the same time, important rule of law elements remain embedded. Kazakhstan is defined as a legal state, the constitution has supreme legal force, fundamental rights are formally recognized. However, these elements are not consolidated under a single explicit rule of law principle, which weakens their function as a guiding standard for interpretation and governance. That brings me to the institutional dimension. Institutional design reflects rule of law standards, but raises questions about balance. The Constitution establishes key safeguards, separation of powers, constitutional review, and judicial independence. However, the distribution of power remains a critical issue. The President retains a central role in appointing key institutional actors, while the government remains primarily accountable to the President. This creates a structural tension. While the formal architecture reflects rule of law principle, the concentration of powers may affect institutional independence in practice. At the same time, the role of citizens in this system is equally important. The Constitution recognizes participation. However, when we look more closely at the legislative process, a different picture emerges. But it was covered comprehensively by the previous speaker, Mr. Evgeny Zhovtis, with a clear case. So I would skip it, just saying that the issue is not whether participation exists, but whether it has a real influence. Civic engagement may be formally present, but its impact on legislative outcomes remains limited. In this context, one provision of the new constitution deserves a particular attention, Article 6, which introduces selective transparency with risks of stigma and unequal participation. One of the most significant developments in the new constitution is Article 6, which introduces transparency obligations for foreign-funded non-profit organizations. Transparency is a legitimate goal. However, the constitutional framing raises important concerns. Article 6 appears to single out foreign-funded NGOs as a specific category. This creates a constitutional asymmetry. Transparency is not applied universally to all actors influencing public policy, but selectively to one segment of civil society. This has two implications in turn. First, the risk of constitutionalized stigma. By highlighting foreign-funded organizations, the Constitution may shape perceptions of their legitimacy and create a sense of suspicion toward them. Second, a chilling effect on participation. Many organizations contributing to legislative processes rely on international cooperation. If they are singled out, they may face reputational pressure or reduce their engagement. In this sense, Article 6 does not only regulate transparency, it may reshape participation by making some voices formally visible, but less equal in practice. So I'd be happy to answer to your questions later.
Thank you very much, Aida. And I think we have more on this human rights analysis now from Alisher, Kozhagulov, a human rights lawyer colleague from Astana, who will explain a bit more the impact on human rights with these new institutional amendments. Thank you, Alisher.
Good morning. My name is Kozhagulov. I'm a human rights lawyer in Kazakhstan, working with civil society organizations and vulnerable groups. I represent human rights organizations Nomad and the Human Rights Initiative Request. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. A referendum was held 2 days ago. This change is very important human rights and democratic development in the country, and we have several serious concerns. Civil society had very limited participation in preparation of these constitutional amendments, the proposals were developed within a short time frame and without real public consultations with independent experts, civil society organizations, or human rights defenders. And we see big influence from Russian federations, especially on two topics. First, against the LGBTI community. Last December, Kazakhstan adopted a new law about LGBT propaganda, similar to law in Russia, Georgia, and Kyrgyzstan. This law prohibits any mention of LGBT content. This law provides for fines of approximately 300 euros for the first offense and administrative arrest for 10 days for the second offense. This law started to apply on March 2. On March 4, a police officer called me and asked some questions about human rights work with the LGBT community in Kazakhstan. On March 8, the police invited us, me and my colleagues, Arsen and Rustam, who are also here today, to the police station. And we had to explain our work. They had one main question: is your work propaganda or not? They collected all our personal data, including our medical status, place of work, home address, and phone contact information, and documented everything in official report. This was not unexpected for us because a few weeks earlier, several media outlets published articles with the headline, "Who will be the first arrested for LGBT propaganda in Kazakhstan?" Our three names were included on that list. Now we are waiting for a court decision that will determine whether our work to protect the LGBT community will be considered propaganda or not. I mentioned this because the new constitutional amendments define marriage exclusively as a union between a man and a woman. This shows the direction where Kazakhstan is going. The second topic concerns foreign fundings. The new constitution proposed special transparency and reporting requirements for NGOs that receive foreign funding. This may stigmatize independent human rights organizations in Kazakhstan. I think this may become a background for a foreign agents approach. Now our government is developing a new law on NGOs, and it may be adopted this year. At the same time, we see that the registration of new organizations is practically blocked until the new law is adopted. For example, for more than a year, we have been trying to register the initiative request, and we have already received 6 refusals. One of the official reasons for refusal was that the protection of human rights is not considered a socially useful goal. This situation shows that the space for independent civil society in Kazakhstan is becoming more limited. Another important issue concerns international law. The new constitutional amendments remove an important rule from the constitution. Before, ratified international treaties had priority over national legislation. Now, international treaties no longer have priority in the legal system of Kazakhstan. This can create legal uncertainty about how international human rights standards will be applied at the national level. This development raised serious concerns about protection of human rights in the future of democratic development in Kazakhstan. We hope the international partners will continue to pay attention to the situation and support independent civil society in our country. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alisher, also for sharing this very varying development, personally also with some of the representatives here. And definitely have to call also on the international community and the OSCE to further really monitor the situation and also to support you in this fight. Let's hear now, as you said at the beginning, maybe a comparative point of a positive example. I mean, we've heard a lot now on the Kazakhstan current process, which we are here for, but we thought it would be interesting to get an Ukrainian voice here. Also namely the law adopted in 2024 and public consultation, so we have a bit of comparison. It was named actually as a good example of the index Anna has mentioned at the beginning, Moldova and Ukraine, in terms of civic safety, share the experience with Ukraine and
Telecom is my person and head of innovation for always showing solidarity with all the colleagues, not only from region of Asia, but a lot for Ukraine. And now she under unprecedented pressure from I think time of Maidan in Kyrgyzstan, absolutely. So I just wanna put your attention to the question for Telecom Ismailova. This we not had now it's quite long story of beginning of her persecution, and now in the end we're in the court with under the pressure of Lawmaking. So just a minute because it's not connecting with our topic, but yeah, exactly. They provide some around the legislation making Kyrgyzstan. It's one of the point, one of the reason why she now under pressure. So our solidarity and just put your attention in this highly human rights person who took many years, like decades, spent with very rights in the world. So yeah, let's come to the positive. Like always, we Ukrainians sometimes we do this way. We do that. Yes, that's good, but not enough. So legislation which we call about public consultation, it's good initiative which providing by our political partners from the Center of Democratic Studies, and that's law which adopted by our Verkhovna Rada, parliament, and the Verkhovna Rada adopted 20 June 2024. And main idea that public participation around the legislation is provided from government side. So we have three sources who can represent bills in the parliament. So that's government and different ministers at president, and that's parliament by themselves. So plus of this great idea that we put more attention and put open discussion of each legislation, which provided from government and bodies who propose this bill need to hear about all the propositions going from different propositions, society, and all. From one side, that put quite a lot of work for these state bodies. They have to respond to give the answers about all of this proposition publicly. But as I told, we always have some. First of all, this law will start it only after 1 year of marketing offers. So when war will finish and at the law level. Second point, it's not covered the legislation proposed by so as you see, maybe the situation for a long time, and what source for creating bills, and they not covered by this law, but still they covered but by other legislation. So it's need to be recognized how it's going to be present. But and last one, president not in effect. And one really important point that budget, although what connected with budget situation, not cover this whole thing. But other way, if one of the example how step by step civil society can hold some ideas, how make more transparency and more open legislation process. One of such why we need to attention maybe the slow democracy that every time do that like every time that is by they initiative we don't integrate it by law, but no. Now we have a problem with unique position civil court. It comes from Speaker of Parliament, responds different group, and we look at that with 2,000 points of different changes, civilian relationship with all the Ukrainian society. And some of these points were crucial limited women's rights. For example, you can divorce if you're pregnant during this. You need to show that like court can take back surname of husband if your action morally not under the standard. So for us, it absolutely stay back. And now it's a discussion because this project never be openly discussed before it's coming. It was registered and controlled. So that's why such initiatives like more about public participation, we think that's achieved, but we think that's for now, and that's need cover parliamentarians' initiative. So I will stop here. So we have a positive news and we have a plan what we will do next. And I hope having colleagues from Kazakhstan in the same process, not something quite. Thanks a lot, Sasha, and I'm sure this dialogue will continue. It only glimpse into what you're doing or what you will do in Anara, let's go back to Kazakhstan before we open the discussion. Civic manifesto. So give us kind of a bit, I mean, of course, of the rules like where also, but also Civic of the right action and we will have that sure right and civil society being involved in discussions which thank you very much. So you can see on the slide the context and the environment of where laws have limited public participation in lawmaking, public oversight, and influence. If civil society had access to lawmaking, laws restricting human rights would not have been passed, and in practice, they would not have been prohibited or punished. In practice, restrictions, control, monitoring, and punishment are observed. Practices are sometimes not based on the law. Our second Human Rights Defenders Protection Index for 2024 revealed the following key trends, characteristics on a vast majority of the 16 countries. First of all, an increase in threats against human rights defenders. As you can see on the picture, as you can see on this slide, we registered or fixing the numbers of the threats to human rights defenders during last 16 years. And last year, you can observe more than 400 threats, but it's only some talks which were registered by the information from social media or mass media. As I already mentioned, we provided index, Human Rights Defenders Protection Index in 16 countries. Mostly this list includes the post-Soviet Union countries, plus Poland, plus Zimbabwe, plus two Asian countries like Singapore and Pakistan. And by result, we try to put some of the points to the main point, to the roadmap, which we propose to the OSCE members of the state. So we classified for three elements, like legislation, like institute, and mechanism. About our results. As I mentioned before, first of all, an increase in threats against human rights defenders. Second, failure to investigate threats. Third, impunity leads to chilling effect. enforce ineffective and discriminatory legal remedies for human rights defenders, the Ombudsman is a part of the repressive mechanism, inaccessibility of judicial protection for human rights defenders. Fifth, marginalization of activists, limited access to public oversight. Step 6, denial of registration of association, prohibition of human rights activity by court decision. 7, formal participation of civil society in lawmaking or lack of access. 8, absence of dependence of NPM, National Preventive Mechanism, where one has not been established. 9, absence of National Human Rights Plan or their formality. 10, laws on foreign agents, on the prosecution of LGBT propaganda, on combating extremism, etc. As you can see, the emphasis is on legislation and procedures. There is a lack of legislation on protection rights activity. The existence of institution does not provide effective legal remedy. This in turn speaks to a characteristic feature of the approach to the procedures. They should be specialized and expand to the completion of human rights activity. Recommendation for the OSCE of what measures to be taken. 5 blocks can be rudely identified. First of all, creation of mechanism, the creation of complaint mechanism, the mandate to investigate threats through the ODIHR, and the special multilateral support fund by voluntary contributions from the state are entirely feasible to implement on the basis of consensus while maintaining a certain balance. Promotion of the adoption of the law on national protection mechanism for human rights defenders, standard and instruments. Develop of standards, first one, incentives for states to take concrete practical action, and last one, support and enhancement. If you will need to receive this presentation, you can share with you.
Thanks a lot, Anara, with so many concrete proposals. But I think that we can share these. I think there's much more discussion needed than we have time now in this hour. But I would encourage now the participants to raise your questions. I would collect them maybe in the first round. Let's see first how many of you raise their other questions to the participants. And please introduce yourself and the page. One, two. Oh, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, all the speakers. Have you provided translation into Russian, or it's better? Okay, yeah, it was better. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. Yes, my name is Vyacheslav. I'm from the organization Base here in Vienna and of LGBT asylum seekers. And I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but last year we received 2 first asylum seekers from Kazakhstan. Before that, for 10 years, the organization did not have this kind of experience. So yeah, and the asylum seekers got positive decisions by the Austrian authorities already. But my question, yeah, towards first Evgeny, well, we all know from like the other experiences of authoritarian regimes that the only goal is to stay in power. And I would say that there are many ways to stay in power, and why President Tokayev chose this very so complicated idea of changing the whole constitution rather than simpler ways, let's say. So what was the purpose, the exact purpose to stay in the power, changing the constitution? And the second question to my LGBT colleagues, activists, is about like how do you see the further steps by the Kazakhstan state in tightening the conditions for the LGBT activism? Maybe we see some analogs with the Russian situation, or there's going to be some other way for shutting down this activity.
give the question on to Evgeny on the purpose of the changes. Are you still with us, Evgeny? Can you hear us?
Yes. I will try to answer this question in a possibly most short way. First of all, you're absolutely right that this constitution in practically is continuation of the previous one. It does not change the system. It's following the same model, strengthening the presidential power and expanding his prerogatives of his powers to appoint the key the key position to fill the key positions in the government, including judiciary, including executive branch of power, and so on. I think that there are, in my opinion, there are three reasons for that. Number one, it's to move further from the Nazarbayev era, to turn the page from the, let's put this way, Nazarbayev's constitution to the Tokayev's constitution. It's number one. Number two, to have more opportunities in certain way purging the apparatus and probably to have more loyalty in apparatus. And thirdly, probably it's the start of the political transition to the next president, to the successor, and the next successor needs more powers because he will be less strong comparatively with Nazarbayev and Tokayev. I think these three factors probably are the most influencing this decision.
And maybe the question on the steps, how you expect, what do you expect in terms of implementation of this new law?
Yeah, thank you. Question. First, we go about Kazakhstan is not only one Kazakhstan, because in last year we had some police raids against in clubs in Astana and Almaty, with Astana, with Almaty, and the police federally done that all people in clubs, and they say we need this list because second of March will go start to apply, and we are going to everybody to we expected developments of bylaws, practice, for practice, because we don't have a clear vision of the vision of what is big propaganda. Because when was discussed in Parliament, it was very, very it's finished better than that. And now the key step will be the case, and maybe the case will be one of the case will be us, and our case, and we can analyze after that the actual practice.
Just briefly name and organization. This was
Arsenal Bakira from Red Housing Group.
I saw you and then the gentleman on the left.
Sébastien Peruzan, the Director of Japan for Action Political Field. So, I mean, the situation of human rights and of civil society in Kazakhstan and Asia is difficult, and that is unfortunately not new. That being said, the change of US policy, which is focusing much more now on transactional economic trade relation, I believe is making things even worse now in terms of human rights, but also in terms of funding. And the closure of USA raised a lot of concerns in Central Asia. We have been talking a lot with my NGO colleagues that's there, they are extremely worried about that. So my question to the panelists is, in this new context, what are you expecting from the US and also funders, and I should say maybe more from other funders or from other foreign stakeholders to react to balance the change of US policy? I mean, I know Anara talked a little bit already about that with USD, but still, I'm curious to hear also panelists, what are you expecting now is very, I would say, complicated context. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this timely question. I think, yeah, many are really suffering from the. Anara, would you like to start? Just, if you are already switched on a short comment on these challenges with the closure of your expectation now from donor organizations and maybe particularly from the US.
I think that first of all, this constitution provides certain kind of legal and let's put this way, and mental framework, ideological framework to the future change in the legislation of the next level. We should expect how it will be reflected in the law on non-profit organizations, in the preparation of the drafting the law on NGOs, and so on and so on and so on. We have to see how it will work. Of course, Aida already mentioned about this provision about transparency and accountability of NGOs, which was put into constitution. I have never seen such constitution where it could be reflected, because usually it's even if you want to do this, you are doing this in the ordinary laws, not in the constitution. But I think that generally the geopolitical context is not favorable. This is the process which is underway. It was said already all around the world, including the Eastern and Western Europe. And what we could expect only, and what we are waiting from the West, at least to keep their adherence and attitude towards values, towards ideals, relating the issues, that it is not good to change legislation this way. This is the pressure on civil society, which have to be of concern for everybody. But it looks like now there is less and less interest to raise these issues. And now we are not talking about some kind of real changes, but not to make this situation even worse, not to move from authoritarianism to dictatorship. This is my key concern.
So, anyone else from the panel?
If I may probably add to what has been already said, one of the implications, I think, one of the new things in the new constitution is that that domestic law controls how treaties work internally. So this is something new, and it may have not only implications not only for the international treaties on human rights, but also for the commercial contracts that Kazakhstan has signed already. Thank you.
I would like to outline 7 key recommendations, not only for US, but also to OSCE members. Can use to develop dialogue with the Republic of Kazakhstan to improve the situation. First of all, developing parliament to broad public dialogue and second, introduce severe and more effective gender and other inclusive measures, support our party belief, special mechanisms for the participation of youth and people with disabilities to ensure the representativeness of civil society in parliament. Third, strengthen parliament's human rights infrastructure by creating a specialized human rights committee. Fourth, institutionalize civil society participation in monitoring law, preparing reports, and holding hearings on key reforms, including constitutional reform. Fifth, introduce mandatory human rights assessment or draft laws affecting human rights. Sixth, consistently use international standards when assessing bills and refer to them in speech. When voting on draft law affecting human rights, prioritize human rights over party discipline. Use all tools to prevent the adoption of repressive, discriminatory laws and adhere to human rights-based, non-discriminatory rhetoric and speeches. 7. And last, to adjust priority and face competencies, deepen the human rights focus, promote openness, and provide citizens with choice, regularly and clearly report to citizens on the results using our proposed methodology for assessing the effectiveness of deputies. Conduct the assessment with the participation of independent experts, human rights NGOs, research centers, and journals. Combining self-assessment with external monitoring, create and update a map of regional problems and build a sustainable system for receiving citizens.
Thank you, Anara. The gentleman on the left had a question. Please briefly introduce yourself and your organization.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Isa. I'm from the World Legal Congress, based in Germany. According to the Human Rights Watch report, 18 Kazakh activists, the all member attitude groups, they are faced 10 years in prison because of they are holding demonstration, peacefully demonstration in front of Chinese embassy in the Kazakhstan, because they are all really big in the confrontation in China. So, of course, then is normally the trial was expected in January 21st this year in the trial program, but after that we don't get any news on the or what because if they are not criminal, just a peaceful demonstration in front of Chinese embassy or Chinese conflict. So, how big China or other foreign interfaces of Kazakhstan legal system? That's number one question. And do we know in the what is the result, what was happening, and for this case?
For those who are not familiar with IPHR case, you can find on the IPHR website a recent statement. The next trial is this week, so it's a very timely discussion. If anyone wants to read on the IPHR case, Evgeny, I see your hand virtually.
Very briefly, we are following this case very closely. We are trying to provide some coverage of this case. But look, when you are dealing with the issues of China and with all this difficult geopolitical situation of location of Kazakhstan between China and Russia, everything in that regard is politicized, and this is very difficult. And the judiciary is not independent; it's politically dependent. And in these cases, the politics is dominating over the law. And that's to address these issues, there should be some kind of political pressure, because it's not the question how the law is applied. It's in these cases, and it is a key problem. This is not about the legal matters; it's about political matters. And even we are trying to raise this issue. We're trying to cover the situation with IPHR and so on. But again, the key problem is that politics is dominating over law, and it's different to address the legal issues because the political issues are on the top and they're defining the outcome. And this is the key problem.
Evgeny, is there anyone from the online participants? Sorry, I forgot to mention that we have online participants as well, except from the experts, of course. I think there's 9 people watching bar or even. Okay. 12 even. Right. In the meantime, because time is already shrinking, I would have a question again back to the referendum, not to the referendum, but now for the future, what you would see as a concrete measure, even if utopian now for the situation in Kazakhstan, how to improve civic participation. I mean, is there anything concretely which could be implemented from the side of your organization, but also in general? Yes. Any thoughts on this? Maybe to have a bit of an outlook. I mean, we have had the grim analysis, but would anything help now to at least increase civic participation in the lawmaking process? Evgeny or
Probably one word I want to add to that, that now the key problem is how after the constitution will be put in force on 1st of July. And I think the government already now will start to draft the new laws to amend these laws because of the adoption of new constitution. How to make this civic participation in this lawmaking process when the provisions of the new constitution will be translated into the legislation of the next level, especially when it relates to the human rights, to the civil society space, and so on. This is here we could address these issues through the involvement of the international organization, OSCE, and so on, trying at least to make these new laws not so draconian or so repressive when this law and order concept will be implemented.
to monitor closely the implementation of the upcoming laws, implementing the constitutional reforms. Are there any questions from the panel or the online participants? If Aida wants to speak. Aida, do you have a comment?
No, actually, not really, because I just wanted to echo Evgeny Alexandrovich saying that we have to clearly monitor what would be happening the next months. Yeah, since there are a few legislative initiatives in the pipeline, like already mentioned, the law on NGOs and charitable organizations, I think it would minimize the role of the civil society participation in everything, not only in lawmaking, but in participation.
Thank you. Anara? I would repeat my recommendation to support us for providing campaign to push to our government adopt the law about national protection mechanism, because we need this law. Without it, we will not have any protected family, any protection, any result for our human rights activity.
Thanks, Anara. I think this is a very good closing recommendations. I mean, the other many recommendations we can send out, but supporting the society, support human rights defenders, protect them. This really, I mean, everybody can do. To raise concrete cases. You mentioned only the 19 activists, but also just one because it was many now intimidated and harassed the run-up of these reforms. Or Azali Yerjanov, for instance, he was boycotting, had a call to boycott the referendum, and he was detained over social media posts. So it's just one of the many cases, but it helps to raise them. So this is our call to OSCE delegations, to other international organizations present, for civil society stand with them. It's very great. And thank you so much for coming from far, from being on the campus and sharing the experience, the stories, and the analysis on this already adopted constitution. Not only the process was really problematic, but also the proposed changes, and now it's really up to monitor very closely and to establish a mechanism that the defenders at the end on the ground really fight for this. So please stand by there at our side. Thanks for coming. Thanks for your questions, and yes, please feel free to continue the discussion outside.
And also thank you for Anna to support us always. Dear participants in Zoom, thank you very much for your participation.